Hello, I'm Matt Galloway, and this is the Current Podcast.
So, my name is Dalen, and I'm organizer for Vancouver 25 Dates. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Nope? Okay, I'll come a bit closer.
Tucked away behind the slot machines of a casino in downtown Vancouver, there's a sports bar. And singles, tired of endless swiping, are placing their bets on finding a partner.
So what's going to happen tonight is we're going to have ladies stay seated at your tables, and guys will be rotating as...
It's an event organized by 25dates.com. 25 opportunities to find a match in just 8 minutes. On this warm summer night, there are 13 potential couples sitting across from each other.
We're rotating to the next table now.
Speed dating is making a comeback. Organizers of this event say they've seen a surge in interest post-pandemic. And for some, online dating has fallen out of favor.
It was slightly better 15 years ago. Now it's horrible. The last 5 years has been just incredibly difficult. And honestly, I'm burned out at this point.
It's very hard to see a genuine profile. I feel like everybody's putting on a show. And I feel uncomfortable putting on a show. I'm a very direct person. I'm a very authentic person. And I feel like we're all being judged, and our value is being decided based on pictures and bits and pieces that we put out there. And that's not what's led me to be in a relationship in the past. It's about the human connection, and I feel like there's not a lot of human in those online interactions anymore.
Online dating has been challenging. I think it's become sort of a game on your phone that you continue swiping, and it seems like for a lot of people, every time they swipe, you're expecting the next person to be better than the last one, which is kind of cruel after a while.
Just like how social media shows you an illusion of life, online dating has also been more of an illusion. You feel more like a guy working with stocks and ETFs, where you're just always trying to figure out the other person. So it's more that organic element is missing. That's why I'm going to do what my grandpa did. Meet a few people, see who vibes with you, try to take it into a decent conversation, and let's see if the other person reciprocates.
I think it opens up the opportunity for us to look into each other's eyes, see each other's faces, feel each other's energy. There's so much that's intangible in how we connect as people. And it's just giving me the opportunity to see what I can't see online and feel what I can't feel online. So it opens up opportunities versus being limited to a screen. So that's what I'm most excited about. And worst case, I spent the night talking to a bunch of different people and then going home. And best case, maybe I'll meet someone that I'll be able to date and develop something good with.
It's not just this group of 30 and 40-somethings going back to meeting in the real world. Revenues and subscriptions for online dating platforms have dropped across the industry. Since 2021, the market value for dating apps has fallen by a staggering $40 billion. Trina Orchard is an associate professor and anthropologist at the University of Western Ontario's School of Health Studies. She's written a memoir about her experiences in online dating called Sticky, Sexy, Sad, Swipe Culture, and the Darker Side of Dating Apps. Hey, Trina.
Good morning.
You just heard those people telling their stories, their feelings, their pain. How relatable are those people we just heard from?
1,000,000%. I was nodding. I was completely in agreement with what they were saying about how boring swiping is, about how difficult it is, about how so much of it seems to be about a sort of a false presentation as opposed to the more organic and sensory information that we can have when we are seeing and meeting people in real life or in the flesh.
Yeah, and one of the women called the dating apps a game on your phone, and one of the guys described it as an illusion. Give me your definition of how you would describe swipe culture.
The swipe culture refers to the broader context that dating apps kind of emerged out of. We think of things like gaming. We think of things like online shopping. And just the physical act of swiping, whether it's right or left or up or down, to open a screen, close a screen, select a course, observe other kinds of things like films and videos, YouTube, different kinds of social media. So dating apps emerge out of that broader context of swipe culture that we've already become quite used to as a society.
But that's in that sense, it's a commodification of then human relationships.
Yes, absolutely. And that sort of reached a new level in dating apps, which emerged sort of as fun, as a game. Sometimes they're connected with online campus culture. And there wasn't really any kind of accompanying discourse. Like, this is how we might want to think about using these platforms. And this is how we might feel while we're using these platforms. And so there really weren't any checks and balances. And so it was really a free-for-all for a very long time. And I think people are now just getting sick of them, bored of them, and they want something more authentic.
Well, which makes me wonder, Trina, for your own story. I mean, you signed up a little later in life, and you wrote about it, and you're quite open and honest about it. Like, what possessed you to do that?
What possessed me to use a dating app, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, knowing a little what you already knew about the pitfalls of dating apps, I just wonder why you dove headfirst into this.
It's a good question. And the short answer is I wanted to connect. I wanted to find someone. I had been sober for a few years, recently out of an abusive relationship. I live in a fairly small city where it's hard to meet people. And it took a lot of courage. I tried a lot of other things before I actually downloaded a dating app, and they didn't work very well, connecting with old flames on the down low, Facebook situations. It just seemed like everybody was having success on dating apps. Yeah, I was very concerned and nervous. I'm a total old-fashioned person. I also was 45 when I began swiping. Part of me was wondering, is anyone even going to be attracted to me? But I had done this personal journey, this work, and I wanted to connect. And so I went for it.
And what was it like for you?
Well, it was an emotional roller coaster. It was surprising. It was so different than dating in the analog times, the in-person, in the flesh situation. The volume of people that we are encouraged to go through, and we seem that we have to go through to meet anybody that is going to stick around for a little while. The very specific kinds of dating-related behavior that only occur on dating apps, the ghosting, the catfishing, hypersexualization. But I was also fascinated. It was so strange. And in the palm of my hand is this culture that I am a complete foreigner in. But I was very determined to figure it out. And I wanted to figure it out to see if that would help my dating success rates. And also, just as a scholar, I thought, I'm looking at everything with fresh eyes. I already study sexuality. I'm kind of an ideal person to document some of the hidden contours of this culture that so many people are using, but might not know about in a really in-depth way.
So much to dig into here. So, Trina, hold on for a second, because I want to bring Katie Caduto into our conversation. She's an assistant professor of media science at Boston University, and she researches online dating apps. And she's conducted national surveys in the U.S. with Ipsos to better understand how people are using these apps. Hi, Katie.
Hello.
Give us the main takeaways from your latest survey. What was the headline from that?
Yeah, it was a really interesting mix. So essentially, looking at the national sample from the United States, we saw that a lot of young people are using dating apps, but they're feeling very disillusioned. And we've been looking at this over time. And so we're seeing, kind of like you said earlier, with the declines in subscriptions and value, people are getting tired of them. And then we're also seeing increases in concerns about things like chatbots, like catfishing, all the things that, again, we've just heard about. And so it's been interesting to see this at the national level decline in interest, and not just interest, but kind of trust and hope even in the apps.
Do people feel they're being lied to?
Sometimes, yeah, definitely. And that's, again, something, it's interesting because it manifests in a few ways. So people feel like other people could be lying to them, but now they're also worried that maybe people are using AI, and so they're not even talking to a real person. So lying is a huge concern.
And why would people even bother going back? Because I know that certainly subscriptions are going down, but there's still a healthy percentage of the population that's using these dating apps. A lot of this knowledge is getting out there. So why do people keep going back? Is it that quest for connection?
I think the quest for connection is part of it, but I also think the apps are just so easy to have. They all offer free options, free tiers. So while you're seeing subscriptions drop, a lot of people will keep the apps because it's just too easy. And I have interviewed people about this, and they'll say, like, it feels like I'm cutting something off if I totally delete them. So I may as well have it on my phone, because then it at least gives me the chance to connect with someone if I decide to, or see who's out there if I decide to. And so I think that's an interesting tension where people feel like it's not the best option, but it's still an option that they want to have.
And Katie, you mentioned artificial intelligence before. Is AI actually impacting the way online dating apps are being used?
We're right at the start of that. So just starting to see people who are, using AI to help them write opening lines, or to help them write some biographical information in their profile. So this is relatively new research, but yes, we're definitely starting to see it. Plus the algorithms themselves that help people to see potential matches that you're going through when you're swiping, that's all AI generated via algorithms. So the AI is very present in this space, and it's only going to continue to be so.
Trina Orchard, what's your anthropologist take on why dating apps are losing momentum after they were so popular for a while?
I think part of it is connected with post-pandemic realities. And we were isolated and had to isolate ourselves for a very long time. And I think there is a broader cultural shift to wanting to be more engaged, authentic. Gen Z folks often refer to it as the soft life. Life that is about pleasure, that is about connection, that is about low key, low stress, self-care, and the underlying desire to spend time with other like-minded people.
Let's go back to the speed dating event for just a moment. And we asked what the most frustrating thing about online dating was, and the overwhelming answer was this.
Absolutely ghosting. I think that it happens too often. Either you're in the midst of a conversation and then someone ghosts you, or you meet them for a casual date or a walk, for example, just to feel someone out and to see if you get along, and then suddenly they're not on your profile anymore. I think it's an easy way out. People are uncomfortable with closing a conversation with someone. It's easy, and I think the difference with being in real life, even though the speed dating is only 5 minutes, it's still, you have that closure.
Katie, tell us more about ghosting. Why do people feel like it's okay to ghost when they're online dating?
Again, the apps, they make things so easy. And I also think it goes back to something that Trina said earlier, that you're going through so many people, that for a lot of people who have lots of matches, it's more about, how do I prioritize the ones that maybe I think are best? Or, how do I focus on some people, with the trade-off being then that other people get treated really poorly, because you might start a conversation and then, again, like the person was just saying, the other person disappears. And so the apps make that really easy to kind of forget that there's a person on the other side of that swipe or that profile.
Well, Trina, you spent years dating in real life. And so I'm interested in knowing, we talk about this. You wouldn't, if you're face-to-face with someone, let's say in a bar or a restaurant, you wouldn't simply get up and walk away in mid-sentence, and yet you can do this online. So how have the apps transformed some of the social norms around dating and relationships?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. And about ghosting, I'll sort of start my response with that. It's also tied up, I think, with the difficulty we have saying no. And how to communicate a lack of desire, or, how to be gentle about letting someone down, or you've just changed your mind. And so I think that exiting the hard left with the ghosting is seen as easier. It doesn't mean that people don't feel kind of crappy about it, but it is so commonplace. And there's also no repercussions for ghosting. So people find it, kind of connected with what Katie said earlier, very, very easy. I think in terms of one of the big impacts that dating apps are having on intimacy is this tension between being hyper-connected, but also the way in which a lot of these connections are hollow. And so they're devoid of really significant emotional, social meaning and just fun, right? They're not fun. People are exhausted. We shouldn't be talking about our intimate lives. It's, oh, it's so much work. Oh, I can't stand it. Don't make me go on the apps. I'm done with dating. There's also, we're seeing a real rise in celibacy. It is becoming like my celibate summer instead of like the hot girl summer. So there is a larger sort of movement going on. We're hearing it a lot more among women in particular about just not dating, but not using dating apps, but not dating in general.
And do you think that that's being driven by this frustration with the dating apps?
I think it's absolutely very much connected. Yes, it is. Very, very much so. And I think also there are moves among midlife women in particular with just not being interested in dragged along in relationships where, whether they're violent or they're not pleasurable, they're just saying no to that and turning more inward or turning with connections with other women as a way to find pleasure and a different kind of intimacy. Friendship is also something we're hearing a lot more people talk about. Platonic relationships. People in Japan are marrying their best friends instead of lovers.
I'm learning so much from this conversation. Okay, Trina, you've said in the book that the game is rigged on the dating apps. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Yes. So this is something that I learned the hard way. When you just first download an app or you're swiping regularly, like a good little user, you get pretty good matches. You get a replenishment of fresh individuals across your platform. Now, then I would take a break from apps and then I'd open my phone, open the app a couple of days later, and all I would see were people who I'd already swiped left on, which means I'm not interested in them. So my reduction in swiping was I was being punished in a way because I wasn't getting fresh, interesting matches. I was just getting people who I'd already indicated that I'm not interested in. And also as users, we are constantly getting messages from each of the apps. It's 9 p.m. It's prime swiping time. Get out there. Don't leave that match waiting. It's bizarre that we are surveilled, right? And so the algorithm is, they're just like mini slot machines, right? You get that dopamine high, but if you don't use them enough, you won't get what you think you're supposed to be looking for.
Wow, you're just taking all the love out of these things right now. Slot machines. Wow, Katie, you've done these surveys. What are the upsides? Like, why are people still coming in, and are they finding some benefits, some joy from these things?
They are, and I think it's easy to think again to Trina's point, like. The algorithms make people feel very uncomfortable, and there is a reward system that is definitely at play. But for some people, they really are a useful tool. And so for as many people that are out there who are skeptical about them or who have had really bad experiences, you do get people who find successful relationships. And so people, again, they still have that sense of hope about the apps. And it does depend too on what someone is looking for. So in my own research, I look a lot at people who are looking for a serious relationship compared to, like a one-night stand or something more casual. And depending on someone's motivations and their intentions, that can really shape their experience. It also then influences things like the apps that they choose to be on. And so I think some of that intentionality does end up helping people. But, it's also the kind of trade-off is your dating pool is only as good as, where you are or where you're willing to go. And so what I tend to see is people who find success tend to live in larger metropolitan areas because they ultimately just have more people that they really can kind of, filter through and evaluate. It becomes a lot harder when you're in a smaller, maybe a rural area or a suburb, and you're, kind of like Trina said, right? You start to just see the same people over and over again.
But Trina, can that also be the upside if you are living in a rural area? I mean, we live in a big country here in Canada. Are there ways that online does allow people who may be otherwise isolated to make a connection? Maybe not find love, but to at least make a connection?
Yeah, I think absolutely that they can offer another way to connect. And I think, to Katie's point, there are some people who do find dating apps to be really effective. And for varying reasons, they find meeting in real life or in the flesh, either it's just not what they want, or there are a number of barriers in the way. And so it can create communities. And I've certainly found love on dating apps.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. It's a bit of a spoiler alert, but how did things work out for you in using your dating apps?
Yeah, I had a range of experiences. Some of them were not great, but some of them were really fun. Some of them were fun, and they never went anywhere, and that's perfectly fine. So I had a spectrum of experiences. I also had two very significant relationships that emerged from them. One of them I'm still, it's sort of an ish situation, but it's 2.5 years and going, right? And that was from Tinder.
That sounds like more than an ish. 2.5 years.
Well, let's just say we've had our little ups and downs, but we still maintain contact. And a number of the people who I met with when I began swiping in 2017, they read drafts of the book, and from the perspective of a lot of men who I'm no longer intimate with, but who I've known for a long time, they're like, men need to read this book. And that's the response. Men are like, wow, we had no idea how women use these things. And women are like, wow, we feel so seen. So that's been a really interesting response.
Okay, let's let Katie feel seen. What's been your experience with dating apps, Katie, if you have any?
It's funny. I have a little bit. That's part of how I actually became interested in them, because I've been studying this for about 8 years now, and started getting interested just like right when they were coming out. I had a lot of friends who were using them, and I had experimented with them, wasn't that interested, but was fascinated by how much some of my friends were swiping and the things that they said they were looking for compared to the things that then they actually did. So that was like what sparked my interest. But hilariously, like, I am married and I met my spouse in real life without a dating app at all. I know that's like the question all the time. It's like, oh, so did you guys meet on Tinder? No.
Well, but Katie, now that you've done this research and you've got the kind of insight that the average person wouldn't have, what's your advice to people who are online dating, who are thinking of trying it, maybe even later in their lives?
One of the things I always recommend is, really thinking about both what you as a user are trying to accomplish on the app. So are you really trying to meet someone? Are you thinking you want something more casual? So being honest with yourself about that, because then that will help you be honest with potential partners. And so then I think the other really important thing to keep in mind, right, is what are your expectations, and both expectations for other people, but for the apps themselves? Because one thing I see a lot is people who have really high expectations for the apps and then feel really let down when something doesn't pan out in those first few swipes. And so I think, maintaining a sense of realism about what the apps might be able to provide, and then also, again, just being honest with yourself as a user about what it is you're going to get out of it. I think those are really critical first steps to take. And then the other thing I like to recommend for people is to really think about, like, when are you swiping? Are you swiping all day? Are you trying to, message people all day? Or do you have a set time to do that? Because again, like Trina said, for many of these apps, they're sending you notifications throughout the day, whether that's, hey, you got a message, or hey, it's time to swipe again. And, I think for a lot of users, that gets really overwhelming. And so I think for a user to take control, for a user to have that sense of autonomy over the app and really thinking about when they're using it really helps to have a better experience.
Trina, what about you? What last word to you? What's your advice for would-be users?
Know that it's going to be weird and frustrating and take a lot of time, probably. But I think one of the fundamental points of advice I would give to folks is, think about ways to enrich your dating ecology. Don't rely only on the apps, because we've been sold this myth that, oh, you can find love. They're so easy. They're so efficient. And they're really not. And so finding ways to get back into the wild and replenish our in-person communication skills is something that I'd also highly recommend.
Okay, I love it. Getting back into the wild. Let's leave it there. Trina, Katie, thank you both so much. Trina Orchard is an associate professor and anthropologist at the University of Western Ontario School of Health Studies, and author of Sticky, Sexy, Sad, The Darker Side of Dating Apps. And Katie Caduto is an assistant professor of media science at Boston University.